From summoning demons to straight up becoming one, Warlock is a pure DPS class that can either deal tons of damage through their minions or wither targets down with damage over time effects. In Cataclysm, this is one of the classes that undergoes one of the largest baseline class reworks, though I would say it still remains pretty similar to the class we know so well. There's plenty more choice for your preferred race in Warlock 2, as both new races in Worgen and Goblin can roll as this class, as can Dwarf on Alliance and Troll on Horde. But there'll be plenty to get through today, so let's make a start on the Warlock in Cataclysm and see how good they were back then. Let's begin as always with the baseline class changes which we have. So first up, soul shards as a physical item in your bag are no longer a thing. You now have up to 3 shards as a resource, and they are displayed just below your character panel. Soul shards are now used for certain powerful spells, as well as the new spell Soul Burn. More on this in a moment. I have to say, as somebody who's played Lock for the vast majority of Classic, as thematic as shards are, when you began doing more difficult PvE encounters, you could legitimately begin to run out of shards because you were spending more than you could recover during a wipe, and in this scenario they did start to get somewhat annoying. Also, PvE doesn't exactly start to get easier in Cata or anything, so no doubt this issue would have been exacerbated as time went on. In the Affliction tree, a life tap now converts 15% of your max health to 120% of that value in mana. Curses have now been split into Curses and Banes. Curses are utility spells such as Weakness, Tongues, Elements, and so on, and Banes are focused around dealing damage, such as Agony or Doom. This means, of course, you can now have one of each active at the same time. Doom now ticks once per 15 seconds with a chance to summon a demon each tick, and its cooldown has been removed. And Drained Soul now generates 3 shards if the target dies whilst being drained. New for Affliction is Dark Intent, so you and a target gain 3% haste. When either one crits, the Warlock gains 3% to periodic healing and damage, and the target gains 1%, stacking 3 times. So overall, when it's stacked up, you're looking at a 3% haste buff and 9% periodic damage for the lock, and 3% haste as well as 3% periodic damage and or healing for the target. Pretty important buff, and your casters are going to be fighting over who gets this. Out of the 3 lock specs, Demonology has the most changes. You now have one button where you can summon all your demons from instead of them being separate spells, and your demons will automatically train spells as you level instead of you needing to go back and buy them grimoires. There's also been a few general changes to the pet commands UI, including Pet Assist, where your pet will just attack what you are, and Move To instead of Stay, so you can command your pet to go to a location. Your Imp has Flee, which instantly moves it to the Warlock's position, as well as Singe Magic, which is just a dispel magic. Voidwalker's Consume Shadows now gains stealth detection whilst it's active. Succubus has Whiplash, which is an AoE that knocks back enemies by a small amount. Fell Hunter's Fell Intelligence now causes targets to regenerate mana every 5 seconds instead of increasing spirit. And Summon Doomguard and Infernal are now major cooldowns for all Warlock specs that share a 10-minute cooldown. Both of them will last 45 seconds and will attack enemies affected by your Bane spells. Infernal's more for AoE and Doomguard for single target. Soul Link is now a baseline ability, diverting 20% damage taken to your demon, and Soulstones can be used to revive targets similar to how Rebirth works, in addition to their previous use. However, in-combat reses are limited to 1 per fight in 10 and 3 in 25. Fell Armor no longer scales with Spirit, and Soul Shatter doesn't use a shard anymore. New for Demonology is Soul Burn, so this will consume one of your soul shards to empower your next spellcast, with a whole variety of effects. You can Soul Burn to reduce the cast time of Drain Life by 50%, summon a demon instantly, gain a 50% move speed buff after using Demonic Circle, make your Soul Fire instant, give Searing Pain bonus crit chance, and causing your health stone to increase max health by 20% for 8 seconds. You also have Soul Harvest, which generates 3 shards and heals 45% of your health over 9 seconds. You precast this when you need shards before fights, and it's good in PvP to heal up a bit. You also get Demon Soul, a new 2-minute DPS focus cooldown. This empowers the Warlock depending on your active demon, lasting 20 seconds. Your Imp will improve critical strike chance of all casted destruction spells by 30%. Voidwalker will transfer all threat generated by the Warlock to the Voidwalker, Succubus will improve Shadow Bolt damage by 10%, Fel Hunter improves periodic damage by 20%, and Felguard increases spell haste by 15%, as well as fire and shadow damage by 10%. Last we have Destruction. Not too many changes here for a change. Soulfire will no longer use a shard, and Shadow Flame actually does some damage now. New for Destruction is Fel Flame. This deals a small amount of damage and increases the duration of Immolate or Unstable Affliction by 6 seconds, but not beyond the original cap. This is good for when you're on the move and you need a button to press, really. Let's check out some of the new talents now. When you pick the Affliction tree, you get Unstable Affliction, which is unchanged. It does damage over time, as well as heavy damage and silences if dispelled. You gain 30% shadow damage, and your mastery simply increases the damage on periodic spells. Jinx is a new talent that makes your Curse of Elements also affect up to 15 targets within 40 yards of the target it's on. This makes it so if you're missing this debuff, you have an easy way to apply it to multiple targets. Soul Swap is another new and iconic addition for Affliction locks. This one deals damage to a target and removes your active dots from them, and then you can recast Soul Swap on another target, and this will reapply all the dots you just removed from the first target. This is of course a great way to target swap really fast, but you can also glyph this to have a 30-second cooldown and to leave your dots on the main target, which makes multi-dotting way easier. Soulburn Seed of Corruption makes Seed apply corruption to all nearby targets when it detonates. This scales up super well with Nightfall and Glyph of Corruption, both of which make it so when your corruption ticks, your next Shadow Bolt has a chance to be instant. Pandemic has been changed and now reduces the global cooldown on all Curse and Bane spells by half a second, and your Drained Soul also refreshes Unstable Affliction on targets below 25%. Everlasting Affliction also causes Haunt and Drain spells to refresh Corruption too, so when you're getting into that execute phase, you have to worry much less about your other dots. Finally, we have Haunt, which is pretty similar to how it was in Wrath, a casted ability which increases all periodic damage effects you deal to the target. Affliction considers prime glyphs such as Haunt to boost its damage amp up a bit, Corruption for more Nightfall procs, and Unstable Affliction to reduce its cast time. When you pick the Demonology talent tree, you gain Summon Felguard. However, it's got a few new tricks now in Cataclysm. Cleave has been replaced by Legion Strike, which applies a Mortal Strike type effect and splits its damage between enemy targets. Axe Toss is a 4-second stun, Intercept has been replaced by Pursuit, which is just a move speed increase, and of course you have Fellstorm, which is basically Warrior's Blade Storm, but on your demon. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, transmogging your Felguard's weapon through glyphs was a thing in MOP, not Cata, so you're gonna have to hold on to that Corrupted Ashbringer for a while longer. You also get 15% bonus fire and shadow damage as Demonology, and your mastery increases all damage done by demons, including yourself when you're in Metamorphosis. In your talents, Fel Domination is gone, and you now have Demonic Rebirth, that gives you a 10-second window to resummon your demon after it dies once per 2 minutes. Impending Doom is new, increasing the chance that Bane of Doom will summon a demon by 30%, as well as giving a bunch of spells a chance to reduce the cooldown on meta. Molten Core is still there, giving Immolate a chance to buff your next 3 Incinerate casts, and Hand of Gul'dan is a brand new ability for your rotation. This calls down a meteor to deal damage to a target, and increases their chance to be crit by any Warlock demon by 10%. Ancient Grimoire increases the duration of both Infernal and Doomguard, and Decimation makes Soulfire into your execute ability. Inferno is new and enables you to channel Hellfire whilst moving. Cremation adds a further 30% damage to Hellfire, and it will cause Hand of Gul'dan to refresh Immolate on your main target. Demonic Pact has been changed to just give raid members plus 10% spell power instead of a value scaling with the Warlock's own spell power. And finally, we still have Metamorphosis in Cata. We've got a while yet before Demon Hunters come along and steal it. But in Cata, it's pretty similar to Wrath. The only big difference is Demonic Charge has been replaced with Demonic Leap, which is just Heroic Leap really. Other than that, it's just really about Immolation Aura and the damage amp it gives you through your mastery. Demonology would consider prime glyphs such as Immolate and Incinerate just for some more damage on these important abilities, as well as Metamorphosis to increase your big cooldown's duration. So how are we expecting the Warlock to fare during Cata Classic? I expect them to have two very viable PvE specs, and then the other one, Destruction. I reckon Destruction will be in a similar position to where it is in Wrath, where it's actually a good spec, it can do respectable damage and beat plenty of other DPS classes, but the question is, when Affliction exists and is better on multi-target, and Demonology exists and is better on single target, why would you? Destruction still doesn't have any special debuffs either that aren't likely to be covered by another class. And at the end of the day, if you want to be brought to a raid, you do need to bring something to the raid yourself. Still, I'm sure there are people out there who will look to play it, but I just don't believe it will be a meta pick in Cata, and we'll talk more about Destruction when we get on to PvP. Affliction was the go-to Warlock spec that was stacked for much of Wrath of the Lich King, but now it definitely has some competition. Affliction should be playable, but it's somewhat more dependent on fights where you can get high value from things such as AoE Corruption from Seed of Corruption, Nightfall procs, Glyph of Soul Swap, and, well, just multi-dotting stuff, basically. Affliction still does fine enough on single target and has a strong execute phase too, so if you enjoyed Affliction in Wrath, it's a pretty similar playstyle, and hitting multiple targets is just straight up easier. Then again, I wouldn't expect to be as consistently high on the damage meters as you were in Wrath. The big meta shift, quite literally, this expansion will be with the Demonology Warlock becoming what I believe will be the most popular spec. With Felguard updated to have a lot more power, a mastery buff to all demons, including the Warlock when transformed, and Doomguard becoming a significant single target DPS cooldown, the Demolocks stand to gain a lot in Cataclysm. They have one of the best opening burst phases when you send all your big cooldowns in at once, and their AoE burst is also very good. You can combine Immolation Aura, Hellfire on the move, and Fellstorm all at the same time. I reckon Warlocks will start off strongest early in the expansion though, and don't scale quite as well as some other casters, notably the Fire Mage, but nevertheless they'll remain a strong pick for Cata if you are after a pure DPS class. Let's move on to PvP and talk a bit about Destruction first. So when you pick Destruction you gain Conflagrate, which is pretty similar to how it's always been in that it instantly deals damage, but it doesn't consume Immolate or Shadow Flame at all now. You get Cataclysm, which is 25% bonus fire spell damage, and your mastery increases your fire damage even more. In the talent tree, improved Soul Fire is new and increases fire and shadow damage dealt by 8% for 20 seconds after having used Soul Fire. Remember, you can Soul Burn now for an instant Soul Fire, so this is an extra bit of burst that Destruction can put into their kit. Shadow Burn is still there, of course, and no longer costs a shard anymore, thankfully. And you can also glyph it, so if it fails to kill a target, its cooldown is reset and then it's put on a 6-second cooldown. So in other words, you can do it twice in a row. Backdraft has been updated to include Chaos Bolt, allowing Destruction to put out even more burst in a short space of time. Burning Embers adds a dot from your Imp's Firebolt and your Soul Fire, and Nether Ward is also changed so that Shadow Ward will instead absorb all spell damage now. You also get Nether Protection, which gives a 30% damage reduction against any spell school when you absorb damage through any means. And finally is Chaos Bolt, which is still the same as it is in Wrath, except it's going to be hitting a bunch more thanks to it benefiting from your mastery. We have a few things worth mentioning in the Demonology tree here as well, such as extra stamina from Demonic Embrace, healing your demon through Fell Synergy, and being able to res your pet instantly for free once per 2 minutes. Destruction though is in a somewhat similar state to Wrath. If you let it sit there and cast spells, they are going to absolutely demolish people, but it is more vulnerable to getting trained down and hard focused. Warlocks do have Soul Link by default now, but other than that your defensives are Nether Ward, Death Coil, Shadow Fury and Demonic Circle. I've no doubt there are people out there who will make this work, but I think it's a bit higher skill cap purely through how well you need to know matchups and how you need to understand trading cooldowns, because when you make make a mistake, it could be super punishing. Affliction is of course also a strong contender for Arena in Cataclysm as well, and there aren't too many changes from the PvE build here. Notable inclusions are Curse of Exhaustion for a movement speed debuff, and improved Howl of Terror for that AoE fear effect. Affliction can be somewhat vulnerable if trained down as well, but where it shines over Destruction is just in the amount of damage you're putting out. This spec goes super well into damage over time heavy pressure comps, where you aim to overwhelm the enemy team the longer the game goes on. Soul swapping via the glyph from one fully dotted target to another is just a massive amount of pressure that comes out of nowhere, and locks can do this once per 30 seconds. The fact that curses and banes are different things is also big in PvP, as you can have a Bane of Agony running for damage, whilst also annoying enemies by spamming Curse of Tongues on them. Skilled Affliction locks will make this class look super unfair, but beginners will probably get clapped by physical damage cleaves. It's a very strong spec, but it needs to be well piloted. Let's check out some tier sets. We'll start with tier 11, the Shadow Flame Regalia. The 2 set reduces the cast time of Chaos Bolt, Hand of Gul'dan and Haunt by 10%, and the 4 set gives periodic damage from Immolate and Unstable Affliction, a chance to cause your next 2 Foul Flame abilities to do 300% more damage. So overall some more damage, and a decent proc on one of your new spells to make it deal some proper damage now and again. Tier 12 is the Bale Spider's Burning Vestments from the Firelands. The 2 set gives your damage a chance to spawn a Fiery Imp to assist you in combat for 15 seconds. Quite a few DPS specs have this kind of proc on their 2 set, and it's just a bit of bonus damage on a 45-second internal cooldown. The 4 set gives your main filler or execute spells a 5% chance to increase all fire and shadow damage dealt for 8 seconds. A pretty small proc chance, but when it happens, this is a huge bonus, and one you'll want to be tracking for sure. Finally, we have the Vestments of the Faceless Shroud from Dragon Soul. The 2 set on this is massive, increasing the duration of Doomguard and Infernal by 30 seconds, and reducing their cooldown by 4 minutes. That's going to put them up to a baseline duration of 1 minute and 15 seconds and a 6-minute cooldown, so if you're on a longer boss fight, you're going to get more than one use out of them. The 4 set makes it so Soulburn gives 10% spell power for 10 seconds after it's cast, and causes Soulfire to refund a shard. So in other words, you get an instant cast Soulfire once per 10 seconds, and you get a permanent 10% damage buff for doing so. Pretty amazing set overall, especially for Demonology. And that is the Warlock in Cata Classic, a class that I reckon I'm gonna be spending a good amount of time on. With a number of viable PvP and PvE specs, good damage output, and an even better Demonology spec, there's a lot to look forwards to here. Warlock should very much remain a valued and wanted pick heading into Cata, so let me know what you think about this class in the expansion, and whether there are any other big points you would have mentioned in the comments down below. And, as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all on the next one very soon.